कर दीजिए. Good afternoon. So let's start today's discussion. So to start with, a very important topic is on Indian-Iran relation. Fine. We have a link since the ancient period. Fine. So Indians link with Iran dates back to history. Recently, India and Iran relation was again in news for some issues for which we have taken up this topic. Recently, India discussed strengthening a bilateral relationship and strategic affairs during the delegation level talk. Recently, there is a delegation level talk with the two sides, India and Iran, for which so this topic was again in news. So India-Iran relations span millennium, marked by meaningful interactions. The two countries share a border till 1947, when the Britishers were ruling the British India, and it was United India. Fine, under the British reign. So we share several common features in their language, culture, and traditions. As I told you in the beginning, so both the countries share a lot since time, since the historical time. So we have the affinity in language, culture, tradition, etc. So the political relationship between India and Iran started in 1950. Relation with two sides was launched. Political relations, or what it is called as the diplomatic talk, started, and they signed the friendship treaty on March 1950. Okay, this is the very first tangible step towards development when India and Iran signed the friendship treaty. That's in 1950, 15th March 1950. Both the sides signed the friendship treaty. Fine. So relationship continued and it developed in subsequent period. Fine. So big change came. So when Prime Minister Vajpayee visited Tehran in 2001 and signed the Tehran Declaration. This is a milestone, you can say, the Tehran Declaration signed between India and Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and the then President of Iran, Mohammad Khatami. Okay. Vision, so it recognized that Khatami's vision of dialogue among civilizations. So they consider India and Iran as civilizations, not as countries. So great that they are civilizations considered as relations or dialogue among civilizations. As a paradigm of international relations based on principle of tolerance, pluralism, and respect for diversity. So what is the basis of this relationship? It is the principle of tolerance, pluralism, and respect for the diversity of both the sides. So this is the very first, you can say, the friendship treaty of 1950, and after nearly 50 years, a high-level visit between the two sides when the Indian Premier visited Iran and the Tehran Declaration was signed. Fine. And subsequent period, there are first developments, like in 2003, just after 2 years. Fine. In 2003, so they have signed the New Delhi Declaration. Okay, this is a beginning again. So the after Tehran Declaration of 2001 and the New Delhi Declarations of 2003. Okay, so it set forth the vision of strategic partnership with the two sides. The 2003 declaration put emphasis on the strategic partnership, something very unique. It is the strategic partnership. So relationship or the bilateral relation were transformed to mere bilateral relation. Get transformed to strategic partnership. Fine. That is in 2003 by signing of the New Delhi Declaration between India and Tehran. So both India and Iran also consult each other on security matters. The regular bilateral exchanges at the level of National Security Advisors and the Deputy National Security Advisors. The economic and commercial relations date back to the past, but there is certain fall in the bilateral trade volume after America imposed sanctions on Iran. Because there is a time when Iran has emerged as the largest crude oil exporter to India. There is a time when India imported the largest quantity crude oil from Iran. But imposition of sanction by USA, time has come when USA impose sanction on Iran for the nuclear issue. Okay, when because what led to this? There is this secret nuclear, the allegation of a clandestine nuclear weapon program by Iran. There is allegation that Iran has been conducting a clandestine or secret nuclear weaponization program. So for which the sanctions were imposed on Iran. So for what? So secret nuclear weaponization program. Fine. That led to imposition of sanction on Iran. And in 2015, there is a joint comprehensive plan of action. Okay, so what this stands for? This JCPA stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action 2015, and it is also known as the P5 plus 1 agreement. Fine. So let's have a clear idea on this, what this P5 plus 1 agreement stands for. Fine. This Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, okay, or P5 plus 1 agreement was signed by the global community with Iran. This P5 are the 5 permanent members of UNSC, and this one stands for Germany. They started negotiations with Iran. So what the negotiations? To stop its nuclear program. Fine. and Iran agreed to it. And as Iran agreed to it, the sanction imposed on Iran, sanctions on Iran were lifted, especially the economic sanction. But in subsequent period, so America decided to withdraw from this and withdraw from what? So USA decided, so alleging that Iran is conducting a secret program again. So USA decided to withdraw from the P5+1 or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and so new sanctions were imposed on Iran. Economic sanction. So countries were barred from doing trading activity with Iran. Okay, so that because of the payment mechanism was interrupted. So Indian oil import from Iran was also affected, so reduced. So from the largest exporter of oil to Iran, so India started reducing its import of oil. So that led to a drastic fall in the bilateral trade volume as been demonstrated here. In 1920, only 4.7 billion, a decrease of 71.99 as compared to a trade of around 17.3 billion the year before. As the new sanctions were imposed on Iran, and America rigidly followed Trump's regime. So that the period of the Trump presidency. Fine. So India's major export to Iran includes rice, tea, sugar, soya, medicines, pharmaceutical, man-made staple fibers, electricity, machinery, etc. Major imports includes inorganic chemicals, fertilizers, cement clinkers, fruits and nuts, leather. Okay. These are the trades which are continuing, but import of petroleum has been drastically reduced. Fine. Coming under American pressure, we reduced the import of oil. That led to a drastic fall in the bilateral trade volume between the two sides. So there are other areas of cooperation during the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Tehran in 2016. So as the agreement was signed in 2015, so prior to that, okay, when Iran was under sanction, so India continued to import oil from Iran. Remember this is a very good relationship. When the global community imposed sanction on Iran, India continued to import crude oil from Iran. And Iran provided that crude oil in the absence of settlement mechanism. So India was unable to make the payment. Okay, am I clear? So India was unable to make the payment. Because all the clearing house non-cooperated in payment to Iran. Fine. But Iran provided oil or crude on credit. crude oil on credit to India. But as the agreement, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was signed in 2015, the sanctions were lifted, led to lifting of sanctions. So the outstanding, so then that resulted in what? The outstanding due. By India to Iran need to be paid. So that led Prime Minister Modi to visit for a discussion with Iranian authority. So the mode of payment, how to make the payment, because this very huge sum was due on India for payment, and Indian leaders were able to convince Iran that will make the payment, so in a phased manner, and Iran agreed to it. That's why Modi visited Iran in May 2016. Fine. And also we are developing the Chabahar port. We became a partner in developing the Chabahar port. We are using this for so invested around 80 million in Chabahar port development. Fine. So open operation began at Chabahar port in December 2018, and this became a connection of India to Central Asia. The Chabahar port is being used by India. Okay, this port, Chabahar port. India. Okay, to entry into Central Asia. Okay, that is what. So investment by India, and also India get it as a entry point to Iran. India has also helped Iran in times of natural disasters and health emergencies. We provided PPE kits, vaccines, etc. to Iran during the COVID-19 pandemic. Fine. This is India's humanitarian gestures to all the countries and also to Iran in particular. The cultural relationship, the India Cultural Centers in Iran was inaugurated in 2013. The culture center was renamed as Swami Vivekananda Culture Center in 2018 and provided separate premises in 2019. The International Day of Yoga was organized in 1918, 1920 and subsequently. The 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak was also observed by the culture center in Iran. And India also promoted people-to-people interaction. There is high-level commitment in both the countries to promote and facilitate people-to-people contract or track-to diplomacy as it is being called. Fine. This people-to-people interaction is for long-standing track-to diplomacy. Fine. So India's pilgrims visit to Shia's pilgrim circuit in Iran, Masad, Hamdan and Iraq, Najaf and Karbala every year. So thousands of Indians visited these places in Iran and Iraq, the holy places for the Muslims from India. India and Iran are keen to project themselves as independent strategic actors, determined to play a role in shaping a new multipolar world in their shared Eurasian neighborhood and also at the global level. You know, the present trend is towards multipolarity. The present world is being presented to be developed as a multipolar world. Fine. In a multipolar world, so every country must have its independent existence. Iran and India supported multipolar world. So unilateral sanction, it is called as unilateral. On Iran by USA is not fully supported by India. But because of its close proximity with USA and its own interest, so India has drastically reduced its oil import from Iraq. It's a reality. This is called the reality of power politics. Fine. Moving further, despite the difficulties posed by the decades of American sanctions, Iran has, along with India, Russia, and a few other countries in the Eurasian region, continued to work on the multimodal international north-south transport corridor. So, this is the project, the biggest ever project being underway, which is known as the multimodal international north-south transport corridor. India is pursuing for integrating Chabahar into this 13 nation in that international north-south transport corridor to enhance the prospect of the Chabahar port. The two sides had pledged to redouble their efforts to build the railway line between Iran's Caspian port of Rasat and Astra on the India-Azerbaijan border. The 130-kilometer line will connect the railway network of Iran, Azerbaijan and Russia. But unfortunately, from the Chabahar railway project, India has been made out of that. The activation of this alternative Caspian Sea route speaks volumes about the positive outlook of Iran, India and Russia on this corridor despite a variety of geopolitical challenges. Finally, against the backdrop of Russian war in Ukraine and Western sanctions, Iran has also been to convince New Delhi to restore its crude oil purchases. This is what, which it cancelled in 2019 and after the threat of US sanctions. So Iran was one of the major crude oil supplier to India, as I have discussed with you. But since 2019, India has completely stopped importing crude oil from Iran, and that is only coming under American pressure. And in the present situation, in this present situation when the Gulf countries are uniting against India on this allegation of some statement made by so this issue need to be discussed, and finally the relationship of the two need to be on the right track again. Fine. Moving further, you can see. So the concern, biggest concern for India in this domain is the US sanction. So US has imposed sanction on Iran, and US has threatened that any country dealing with Iran will be also coming under American sanction. The sanction imposed by US on Iran after Tehran withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018 may have virtually destroyed India-Iran trade, especially in India's energy import from Iran. Okay. So in 2018, the agreement what this is called the P5 plus 1. The P5 plus 1, what is this? The P5 plus 1 agreement, which is known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action 2015. So Iran withdrew from it in 2018. And since 2019, coming under American threat, So India stopped its oil import from Iran. India has completely stopped its oil import from Iran. This is a big setback to the bilateral trade. Fine. So, because Iran supplied oil to us at a very cheaper rate, and coming under American pressure, we have to stop it and we have to search for alternatives. Then, second on anti-Iran coalition, ties also appear to have been hit by New Delhi's surprise decision to join the Israeli-India UAE-US group, portrayed as an anti-Iran coalition, and by perceptions of Indian support to the Yemeni Houthis behind the drone attack on a UAE oil facility where an Indian was among those killed. Some stray incidents in the past led to the trust deficit between the two sides. But this is a very small incident which can be resolved. Should not be taken with that deeper thought to affect the long-standing bilateral relationship. Iran also happens to be the entry point for India for trade with the Central Asian countries where India's geographical approach is limited, because our entry to Central Asia each has a big scope, but the prospect is much bright, but our strategy for that has not been that forthcoming unless we take up a good relationship with Iran. With the increasing presence of China in Iran, India has been concerned about the strategic stakes of the Chabahar port, because we have invested a lot in Chabahar port, and Chabahar port has a very big prospect. Chabahar port has a big prospect in India's relation with the Central Asian countries. The access to Chabahar port may prove strategically important for India, because China is trying to spread its influence in this region, and this Chabahar port project was a big trump card in Indian hand, and India had to strengthen it. China close ties with oil producers can bring governance and energy security issue for India, may threat that for India also. Fine. India abstained during this recent voting on the resolution by the US and its allies to censure Iran at the International Atomic Energy Agency. In the recent past, USA moved a motion at the International Atomic Energy Agency to censure Iran, to which India has not supported. This is in keeping with its stance of resolving the issue through dialogue. The revival of the nuclear deal could give a fillip to India's economic tie with Iran. If so, what India is optimistic about? So, if this P5+1 agreement is restored, then so Indian scope for importing oil from Iran will be boosted. Fine. That is what. Then India and Iran it revealed that ties affected also by the great recent global events like the Russia-Ukraine war and the American sanction and the Indian decision to reduce its oil import from Iran. India must try to remain politically engaged with Iran for a better appreciation of each other's sensitivities and compulsions and mutual interest. It is extremely important for India to take the lead in creating an institutional structure with Iran and Afghanistan and seriously pursue the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline project to ensure energy security. So the TAPI pipeline, as they are popularly called as, this TAPI, T-A-P, TAPI gas pipeline to transport gas from Turkmenistan and Iran to India via Afghanistan and Pakistan. Okay, so this is very prospective project to lay the foundation of a huge gas pipeline network to supply gas to India to fulfill the energy need of India. Fine. So because the other one, the Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline is a non-starter. So there is one also IPI. So Iran, Pakistan, India gas pipeline. This is right now becoming very uncertain. So TAPI has a big prospect for India, and India should pursue it, maintain relations with Iran, and that will definitely be good for both the sides. Moving next. So recently in UP, massive demolition drives are underway. Prior to the elections, during the election, and the post-election period. So the bulldozer became the symbol of the government in Uttar Pradesh. Recent demolition drive in the aftermath of this prophet remarks, Roe may challenge certain basic tenets of law. Other things, Justice Gowda in one of his 12 signatories of that letter urging Supreme Court to take so much of cognizance of the demolition of Uttar Pradesh. So that discussion about the tenets of the law includes the right of a person to be heard first, that the state can deprive a person of his or her property only after following due procedure of law, and under the authority of a valid law as mandated under Article 301 of the Constitution. Article 300A. So, right to property, which was under Article 31, has been made a civil right under Article 300A. So, but it is a right, it is a legal right. Supreme Court stands the right to property under Article 300A is a human right. Fine. High Court stands Article 300A is a potent right. Demolitions were a product of the politicization of the bureaucracy. Acts like demolitions were a nuclear button held against the problem creator. So the recent demolitions drive is against those who are creating problem for the government, the demonstrators, they have been targeted, and so their establishments being demolished, which has raised this issue. A plea by the Jamaati-e-Hindu in a Supreme Court contended that the demolition of properties carried out by the Uttar Pradesh government retaliation was in breach of the law enacted by the state legislature itself. It referred to Section 10 of the Uttar Pradesh Regulation of Building Operation Act of 1958, which mandates that a building should not be demolished without giving the affected parties a reasonable opportunity to be heard. Whose building will be demolished, that party must be given the sufficient scope to be heard. So, after hearing from him or her, any action can be taken. Section 27 of the Uttar Pradesh Urban Planning and Development Act 1973 requires the affected person to be heard and given 15 days prior notice before proceeding with the demolition, which are not being observed right now. Besides this, that allows a person aggrieved with the order of demolition to appeal within 30 days. Without taking this law into consideration, which has been passed by the UP Assembly, the UP government and the bureaucracy right now on a massive demolition spree. That is why question mark has been raised on the mindset or the mental frame of the UP government and the bureaucracy which is supporting it, and the allegations that the bureaucracy has been politicized to some extent, for which so there is massive demolitions work going on. Fine. Then the next we will be discussing the ASEAN Indian Foreign Minister meeting. So you know ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, as it is known as the ASEAN, or this one ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The association of 10 countries formed in 1967 by the Bangkok Declaration. And the first summit took place in 1976. So India is not a member of ASEAN, but India is a free trade partner with ASEAN. India is a member of the East Asian Summit Mechanism, of EA, East Asian Summit Mechanism, which is a subsidiary of ASEAN with some other countries including India. India has free trade agreement with ASEAN covering both goods and services. Fine. So recently there is a special ASEAN India Foreign Ministers meeting, SAIFM, which was hosted by India, for which it is in news. Let's see what are the development over there at the meeting. The SAIFM is a first Asia-India Foreign Ministers meeting hosted by India in New Delhi. It marked two major anniversaries: 30th anniversary of India's dialogue relations with Asia and 10th anniversary of India's strategic partnership with Asia. India was a dialogue partner of ASEAN 30 years back. India was a strategic partner of ASEAN 10 years back. Okay. So ASEAN Indian friendship year, so this year 2022, this is important, remember the exam point of view. The year 2022 has been designated as the year of friendship by India and ASEAN. This year 2022 has been designated the ASEAN Indian friendship year. The 24th ASEAN Indian Senior Officers meeting also took place in New Delhi this year. The track 1.5 dialogue, the 12th edition of this Delhi dialogue, followed by the SAIFM in New Delhi. The theme this year dialogue is building bridges in the Indo-Pacific. So all these countries are the neighboring countries, which means in East Asia. So they have closeness with Indian Ocean, and right now from India Ocean to the Pacific. So they are right now thinking to Indo-Pacific. Focus is on Indo-Pacific. From Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So India want to be more closer with ASEAN because ASEAN proximity will bring prosperity for India. Because close proximity in trade will enhance the volume of economic interaction, and with the strategic relationship, so the security issues can be discussed, and based on the first cultural relationship. So we can rebuild our relationship because from we have a policy. The government of India has a policy of look east, and from look east we have transferred to act east policy for wider interaction with the ASEAN countries, which has a very big prospect for India. Fine. So what are the major outcomes? ASEAN countries agree to uphold multilateralism in jointly responding to the global and regional and global challenges. Ukraine crisis and its knock-on effects on food, energy security, prices of fertilizers and commodity, as well as logistic and supply chains. Okay. So Chinese assertiveness in the region, because many countries of this ASEAN are against China and the Chinese hegemony. So Vietnam, Thailand, etc. are strictly opposing this Chinese hegemony in this region. The ASEAN reaffirmed the commitment to multilateralism found in the principle of international law, including the Charter of the United Nations and the 1982 United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea and other relevant UN treaties and conventions. Maintain an open and inclusive regional cooperation framework, support ASEAN centrality in evolving rules-based regional architecture, not regional hegemony. The Chinese hegemony is being opposed by the ASEAN members. It is being opposed, the hegemony by China is being opposed. Chinese hegemony is being opposed because they want oppose the multipolar world, jointly responding to regional and global challenges, and so this should be on a regional architecture. They want to develop this region without hegemony of any particular country, as is being claimed by China in the South China Sea region, with some Asian members. India's closeness with ASEAN is also facilitated by this because they want to checkmate China and the Chinese hegemony with Indian active involvement in the region. That's why they are able to do it. Fine. So moving further, you can see the next topic for today's discussion. Okay. The mega G5 spectrum auction. So government has decided to auction the 5G spectrums. So because we are on a path for upgrading our mobile technology from 4G to 5G. The spectrum is the electromagnetic wave present in the ionosphere. Recently, the Indian Cabinet approved the auction of the airwaves capable of offering 5th generation or 5G telecom services, including ultra-high-speed internet. The Indian Cabinet gave its nod for setting up captive 5G network by big technology firms. Devices such as cell phones and wireless telephones require signal to connect from one end to the another. These signals are carried on airwaves, which must be sent at designated frequency to avoid any kind of interference. The Indian government owns all the public available assets, including the frequency of the airwaves. So airwaves are known as the spectrum. They are called as the spectrum. This airwave are called as spectrum. What is this? This includes the airwaves called as spectrum. Due to this 2G spectrums come, government has followed open auction of spectrum. Because at 2G, so they follow the fast come fast serve. That led to lot of allegation of irregularities. So the 5G will be auctioned and government will get a huge revenue on this account, and the telecom service providers, they will get different regions in auction to provide the services. So for information, so spectrum is the electromagnetic wave present in the ionosphere. It being the property of the government will auction it to the service providers and will generate a huge fund for this, and that fund will be uh, coming to the government, and the service providers who get this spectrum allocated in their favor will provide the services. Fine. It is the largest upgrade in the long-term evolution's mobile broadband network with reduced latency than the 4G. 5G technology offers an extremely low latency rate and delay because the sending and receiving informations from 200 milliseconds for 4G, 5G brings it down to 0 milliseconds. It works on three brand of the spectrum with their respective pros and cons. Okay, so the five this 5G will bring a big revolution in Indian mobile technology operations. So after discussing these things, let us see some questions that have been set for today. Coming to question number one, consider the following statement regarding One Health Framework. The One Health Framework is aimed at improving national and state level resources, allocations and policy ecosystem on early predictions, detection and diagnosis of zoonotic disease. Zoonotic disease are diseases that spread from the animal to the human beings. So they are called as the zoonotic diseases. The Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairy has launched this One Health program throughout India. This is wrong. It has been run on pilot project, not over India, but a particular state, and the state is Uttarakhand. So coming to this, so this One Health program has been launched on a pilot project, not throughout India. This is wrong. This has been run on a pilot project. Okay, this was launched as a pilot project. This One Health has been launched as a pilot project in Uttarakhand. And success of this may lead it to spread to other countries, so other states. So answer is C. For this question, the right answer is C. Then coming to question number 2. Question number 2. A language model of dialogue applications in artificial intelligence based chatbot developed by Google. Google has developed it. So answer here is C. Consider the following statement about the Press Council of India. It is a statutory organization operating under the Press Council Act of 1978. It is right. The council shall have the same power throughout India as were vested in the civil court while trying a suit under the Code of Civil Procedure. This is also right. Okay, so this council, so normally a judge is appointed as the chairperson of the Press Council of India. So this act as a civil court. The chairman of the council is nominated by the Chief Justice of India. No, the chairman of this council is nominated by a committee, by a 3-member committee consisting of the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the chairperson of Rajya Sabha, and one more person appointed by the members of the Press Council of India. These three decide the or choose the nominate the Chief Justice, that Chairman of the Press Council of India. So option 3 is incorrect. So 1 and 2 are right. So answer is C. Then coming to question number 4. So cost inflation index, it is an index used to calculate the inflation adjusted rise in the value of the asset including debt mutual funds. It is notified by RBI, Reserve Bank of India, based on inputs from National Statistics Office. No, this is not prepared by the RBI, rather the CBDC, Central Board of Direct Taxes, prepare this. Okay, this is not by the RBI, this is by the CBDC, CBDT, Central Board of Direct Taxes. Yes, that's second. This is by the CBDC. Central Board of Direct Taxes. Okay. Same value can also be used. This right. The Sarojini Naidu was the first Indian to be elected as the president of All India Women's Conference. You know that Amrita Kaur was the founding member, but she was not the president. Okay, it is Maharani Chimanbai Gaikwad was the first woman, Indian woman, chairperson of this, president of this All India Women Conference. So let me write it for you. So it is not Sarojini Naidu. Okay, she is not. This is wrong. So who? It is Maharani Gaikwad. The first Indian to be elected as the president of AICW. Although Amrita Kaur was its founding member. Fine. So, friends, today we discussed some important topics, and this discussion will continue every day. Be in time. Watch this to apprise yourself for the developments, including the MCQs, which will be beneficial for your upcoming examinations. Thank you for watching. Thanks again.